All right, well, we're a minute after 10, and so I know there's people are joining us. We'll just keep letting them in as they come on. Uh, my name is Shauna Feth. I'm President and CEO of the Alberta Chambers of Commerce, and we're really happy to co-host this information session on the work sharing program with the Jasper Park Chamber of Commerce. And I see that Nikki is on the call, so welcome, Nikki. Good to see you. She is our representative from Jasper Park Chamber. So if you have any questions specifically for her, she is here to answer those, and she's taking notes and taking that all back to her chamber as well. So we're excited to have her join. Also, I noticed on the call, we have our Assistant Deputy Minister of the Prairies Region, Michelle Evans. Hello, Michelle. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. And so she may also jump in at some point if she has any additional information to share. So without further ado, I'm going to pass this conversation over to my colleague, Nancy Healy. Nancy is the Commissioner for Employers and is going to lead us in this conversation around the program. So Nancy.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Bonjour for those who parlent en français. Je parle un petit peu en français. I hope I'm joined by some officials from Service Canada and the work sharing program. If they're on the call, if they can turn on their camera, that would be great. I am waiting for them because they are the experts in the program. Cynthia, that's you. Is it Cynthia?
Yes.
Yes.
Good morning,
Perfect.
Nancy.
Good morning. Thanks
Morning,
so much.
Cynthia.
Good morning.
So just a quick introduction. So work sharing is a layoff prevention, a retention program for employers that's existed as part of the employment insurance program for a long time. But we've introduced some special measures to deal with the acute situation that has occurred in Jasper Park. And as I mentioned, it's a way for employers in particular to hang on to workers to keep an attachment to them, and by they're not able to provide them with 100% of their regular hours, to provide them with some hours, and the other hours of the other regular work week would be covered through EI benefits. Is kind of what the program is like in a nutshell. And so we were happy to, and there's a number of, it's a tripartite agreement between the employer, the workers, and Service Canada. And we were able to bring in some measures which will, prolong the program for Jasper Park, and as well to make it a bit easier for people to qualify for the program. So Cynthia, I'm going to turn it over to you to kind of take us through an introduction to the program, and then we can probably open it up for some questions. Does that sound good?
Apologies.
No problem.
Lost my mute button there. Thank you very much. Sure, Nancy, that's great. So what I'll do is I'll just maybe take folks through a little bit of a backgrounder and overview of the program, and then hone in on the special measures a little bit to identify and maybe emphasize what the flexibilities are that have been introduced. So as Nancy said, the program itself is really a program. The heart of it is to help employers avoid the layoffs when there is a temporary decrease in their business activity that's beyond their control. The program provides the EI benefits to eligible employees. And again, when they have to reduce their normal working hours and they're on work sharing, then they could get the payment for those hours missed due to work sharing. And the other key piece is the employees share the available work while the employer recovers. That agreement is struck then between, if the employer qualifies, then the agreement is between the employers, the employees, and the government of Canada. It is really a very advantageous program, and the benefits, the win-win for the employers is that they continue to be able to operate with reduced work activity rather. The retention of their employees, whom quite often, they've got long-term employers, or they've invested in training in these employees and experienced workers. So it helps them avoid having to lay them off and then potentially have to maybe recruit new folks, or bring them back on, and maybe even train new employees. Employers employees rather are able to keep their jobs, maintain their skills, and they receive the benefits through EI for the hours that they missed due to work sharing. The other bonus for the employees is that the EI benefits that they're paid during the week potentially do not impact any regular benefits should they have to switch benefit type later on. So those are the sort of the overall win-wins of the program. And then when we're looking at some other eligibility criteria, we would be focusing on the employers making sure that, again, they're putting forward people who are currently working, and folks that are essential to the operation, the day-to-day operation of their business. And as far as the special measures go, we have flexibilities that have been introduced under the special measures, and those will include the I guess the main one that we see that doesn't fall under our regular program would be the seasonal employees. So it could be seasonal employers who are applying, and who may also have then seasonal employees. So that is something under our regular program that we don't usually see. And well, not that don't usually see, but that are not included under our eligibility when it comes to the temporary special measures. It is a flexibility that has been introduced. The other piece that is I guess different here is that normally when an employer is applying and they've had a previous agreement, they would have to wait a certain period of time between the time that their previous agreement has ended and they would like to apply for a new one. So that's what we call the mandatory cooling off period between agreements. So for our special measures, that has been waived. And if an employer needs to apply immediately for the special measures, they can do so without having to serve that period of time between agreements. Another eligibility criteria that is considered under the is waived under the special measures is the demonstration of a 10% decrease in their business activity. So normally employers would have to demonstrate that they are experiencing at least a 10% decline in their business or work levels. And in special measures, that is removed. So employers can apply and then go forward during the agreement without having to. And they still have to demonstrate that they're utilizing the program, but that minimum 10% allows them to be considered. The utilization rate, which is the rate at which the program is utilized, so the number of hours that the employer has to reduce, can be exceeded under the temporary special measures. And that can be in excess of the 60%, which is the normal ceiling. So if an employer has a 40-hour rather work week, and they need to reduce their hours considerably. Normally, it would be a maximum of 3 days per week, but under the temporary special measures, that can exceed that 3 days per week in that example. The recovery measures. So normally under work sharing, we see recovery measures that consists of activities the employer will undertake to try and get their business back on track and resume normal work levels. So under the temporary special measures, the recovery measures are really, eased in the sense that the employer can focus on the keeping the business viable. So, returning or recovering rather, and not having to focus specifically on, getting right back to normal levels by the end of the agreement. So it's focusing on those activities or steps that the employer will need to take due to the impacts of the fire and um, and the and the damages, et cetera, that have affected them. As far as special measures, they provide, overall, this is that targeted support. So it's tailored really to what's happened, in the sense that there's been this event that's happened, July 2024, and the targeted support in the form of the special measures to assist the businesses to remain viable, to get back to trying to recover and avoid the layoffs for the specific period of time. The agreement duration, so the minimum duration for a work sharing agreement is 6 weeks, and the maximum is 26 weeks. And there is obviously within that time frame option to apply for the number of weeks that the employer estimates they will need. If they do require additional weeks and they haven't applied for the full 26, they may request that during the agreement. They may request an extension. In terms of I think we've covered just about everything. One of the things from the regular program that is maintained under our special measures is the work sharing unit. So when we talk about work sharing units and the employer, they can apply for their employees who are being affected. And that could be, a large cohort of people, could be a number of different types of occupations. And so when we look at the units, they're usually grouped by occupation, and the employer can include as many as they feel they need. The key within the work sharing unit is that, as I mentioned earlier, that equal sharing of work. So employers have to, and employees must agree that they will reduce their hours and share the available work during the period of the agreement. And then I guess it's just, contact. So if employers have questions, then we have some points of contact for them. If it's a general inquiry about the program, they can either contact our employer contact center, and then if they do have specific questions that maybe are a little bit more looking for a bit more info, they could contact our national unit as well, that will assist, and if necessary, refer their inquiry to the region. So we have it set up that we have our regional contact points, our offices for work sharing in the different regions. Western Canada and territories specifically we have our unit. If the employer has an agreement in existence, then they may contact directly to our unit if that's where the agreement is, and the team there will assist and help them to determine whether they may be eligible for special measures and what the next steps are. So I'm not sure, Nancy, about the contact information. I did see in the invite that the website was there. I think that's a really great spot for people to go to um, just get started and be able to see what the program criteria are, and then special measures in particular, and then go from there if they do need to speak to somebody, um, either in the contact center or as the other national um, contact point I mentioned, or our regional office. On the EI side, just maybe before I leave there, the EI side um, is a little different. In other words, the program is delivered through our program unit, let's say in WT in the Western and Territory regions, and then we kind of set things up and get the agreement going, and then over to EI when it comes to the individual employees. So we do not handle the EI benefits, and but there is support and there's information about EI benefits on the website. Some links there to help the employees understand what's involved and where they can go for information. So just wanted to make that distinction. But I think I've covered just about some of the main points without getting into too much detail. And Nancy, I'm not sure
Yeah,
if you have anything to add.
thanks for that, Cynthia. And I'll open up for some questions. I have some as well. But before we go any further, I just want to welcome Mona Nandy, who's the Director General of EI Policy, to the conversation here. And, one of the things, Cynthia, I think some people want to know, like, what kind of information does an employer have to complete on an application process? And, it's the regular contact information, but what other kind of information would an employer have to provide on the application? And that being said, I mean, I've seen the application. It's about 4 pages long, maybe, but it's all employers just have to, tick, are they unionized or not unionized, the number of people, the contact information. It's not 4 pages of essays or anything like that. It's much more a fillable application form, I assume. I just see the final documentation that comes in. So, what kind of information do they have to include on the application?
Right. So the application form itself is, as you said, it's not doesn't require essays or a lot of expanded narrative, but the employer can certainly add information. So some of the questions are asked, and I guess the range of questions would be basic employer information. So location of the employer and address and that sort of thing, right through to the specifics. So there are basically 4 parts to the application. That being the first one, identifying an employer representative. So somebody who's designated by the employer to be the contact for the application and potentially the agreement, and that person must have signing authority for the company. Also an employee representative. So they have the duty or the role of representing the employees from each of the work sharing units. So each work sharing unit would have their own employee representative, and the employees appoint that individual, and they then assist to make sure that the employees have the information they need about the agreement and how to apply for EI, so what those next steps are. The union representative, if there is one, and sometimes there are both, there would be a union representative for the unionized employees, and they have that similar role as the one of the employee representative. Additional information where we specify, okay, you're looking for work sharing for how many people, so the number of employees, and we look for a contact on the payroll side. So we have somebody who, if we need to, we can speak to about um, the utilization reports that are eventually going to come in, and those are reports that the employer will complete once the agreement is signed, and they've received full information from their contact, the program officer, who has assessed their application, and they'll assist them to understand what the next steps are to get the information to the employees, and then getting EI information to the EI point. So we liaise with our EI colleagues to make sure that the ground or the foundation is set for the EI claims to be established once the employees apply. So the employees must apply for EI, but the payroll administrator is somebody that we like to have on board should we need their assistance at some point. For example, when we monitor the agreements, so we do during the period of the agreement, we do look at the activity and contact the employees to support, see how things are going, um, deal with any challenges and help point them in the right direction if they need assistance. Um, Information on the shortage of work and what is causing it, and an explanation about some of the factors that are causing that shortage of work. So for example, with the wildfires and the challenges, we would look to have a brief explanation and get an idea of just how the business is being affected. Hand in hand with that, we look for recovery measures. So I mentioned earlier that these are more streamlined, or there's flexibility here, and those measures can focus specifically on what the business is doing to try and remain viable and potentially recover. And then we look for specifics on the employees in each unit. So for EI purposes, they will be providing information when they apply to EI. So that's not what we're asking for in the application. We are just looking for information on the average weekly earnings for each unit. And the reason we do that is we estimate what the cost of work sharing would be and what the cost of layoff would be. So we do a bit of a cost analysis. So we gather some information in that part of the application. And of course, the number of employees participating and maybe those that aren't participating. So if you have folks that are focused on, let's say, sales, and they're separate from the group of people that are carrying out the day-to-day work. So if there's a production element and your employees are working um, to produce a product and get that product out to a client, those folks are the ones that typically we see involved in the work sharing. People that are involved in sales or management, folks that are responsible for making the decisions on the direction of the company, bringing in new business, etc. Those folks typically are not included. And then we look for some information on the amount of work that is available. So how many hours a week are you able to provide? And how many hours do you think you're going to need when it comes to work sharing? So we look at that for the purposes of kind of figuring out, okay, going forward, if this agreement is approved, what's it look like for the utilization of the program, and how many hours would that involve? And then those hours would be reported by the employer eventually when they submit their information to EI. So there is that responsibility for the employer to be providing information to us for the agreement purposes, and then to EI in order to facilitate payment to the employees. They're basically, the fifth part of the application, I mentioned four parts for information, but there's a fifth part that does require the employer and the employee and or union rep um, to add their name, attesting to the fact that they do require the program, and that they've submitted the information to the best of their ability. So that's a complete application form. Hand in hand with that, we have what's called an attachment A. And that's just a very simple form. It lays out um, the employer's um, name and address, and then it represents the employee information, so in more detail. So we're looking for the list of employees by name and what their occupation is and their normal weekly hours. And again, we gather that for eligibility purposes for the program, but also for employment insurance, because this form is eventually shared with the EI side, and they use it to set up the claims for the individual employees. And that form is also eventually signed by the employee rep, or if it's a group of unionized employees, the unionized employee rep. And that again it forms part eventually part of the agreement. So that attachment A, we include once the application has been approved and it goes forward, and there would be an agreement signed by all parties. So that's the application package. I know it's a lot of information, but as Nancy said, it is not um, a complicated or overburdening type of application that requires a lot of narrative and et cetera, et cetera. I think the main parts that we do focus in on are what are the reasons for the work shortage, and what are the factors that have led you to apply for the benefits. And in the case of special measures, it's going to be, focused on, we understand that, it's going to be focused on the impact of the wildfires, and but specifically how it's affecting your individual business. And perhaps you've lost clients, perhaps there's an aspect to the um, business that isn't up and running yet, so you're just focusing on getting back on track. But we do look for recovery measures that speak to that shortage. So I think that's pretty much it for me. I'll stop there.
Yeah, thanks, Cynthia, for that. That was a lot of detail, but I don't want people, having reviewed a number of these applications as they come in. I hope it's not too onerous, and there's I don't my read of it. I don't think it'll be too difficult for a number of employers to complete these applications. And one of the things that's kind of accepted is that we have these special measures in because there's an understanding of the unique situation. Of the number of visitors that can come into the park. We know that your volumes are already down, and that's kind of an accepted. And so the proof that your business is down, it does not have to be as onerous because it's kind of a given. That's why we have these special measures here. I know we have a few questions in the chat, and I know Moni, you've been trying to answer some of those in the chat, but maybe you can want to do those orally right now.
Sure. I think Heidi has a couple questions she would just like to ask Mona. Thank you.
Sure. And maybe just before Heidi, you go, I'll just introduce myself. I know Nancy did a good job, but hi, everyone. Sorry to be a few minutes late. Just joining in from Ottawa. My name is Mona Nandy, and I'm the DG of Employment Insurance Policy here at Employment and Social Development Canada. And it is a pleasure to be on this call with all of you at the Alberta Chamber of Commerce and in Jasper. So thank you for the invitation.
Thanks, Mona. So Heidi. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for this presentation. Just looking at the form and the work that needs to be done. I'm with the Jasper Employment and Education Center, so we've dealt with most of the employees who have been laid off. And so speaking from that perspective, most people have an open EI claim. Various businesses, for a variety of reasons, have a lot of people are being employed at 15 hours a week, 20, you get an event like Jasper in January, things go up. So most people are underemployed in Jasper right now. So how does that affect EI? And I want to look at it in two lenses. Okay, we have temporary foreign workers right now who do not qualify. They didn't hit 670 prior to the fire, so they didn't qualify for EI. So will they be eligible? And how does that affect current EI claims that it will be continuous through this program? Because that's what we're seeing ongoing. So this program would be great for a lot of places who have to decrease the number of hours that people are having. But with work units, but there is open EI claims. We help a lot of people with their EI claims, and we're keeping them open at this point because, until May shows up, things don't really get busier in Jasper. So it is very variable hours right now.
Yeah, Heidi, great question. I think you hit on the nail on the head when you were talking about, this is different because what we're talking about right now is work sharing, the work sharing program and new work sharing flexibilities that have been introduced to support businesses and workers in the situations where workers are not laid off. And in fact, those employers want to avert those layoffs by virtue of the fact that they've entered into a work sharing agreement with their employees and with Service Canada, and they're reducing hours equally for all of those employees, in sort of in in compensation of some of those lost wages because of temporarily reduced work weeks while the businesses recover from the impact, the terrible impact of the wildfires. There are EI benefits that could be available to those employees, provided that they meet the requirements of the program. So that's a little bit different. That's what we're talking about today, but I totally hear you. There is an issue, as you were describing and living with workers who are having challenges qualifying for EI. They may not have had enough hours in sort of the qualifying period, which we call typically the 52 weeks before they establish their claim. And that is definitely an issue that the government is aware of, trying to work through. I know the requirements. I'm sorry, I don't know exactly what the requirement was or is right now as of January 2022 for hours requirements in your EI region, but I think it was around 595 the last time I checked. And so that would be the hours requirement for somebody who was establishing a claim for this EI week. That being said, I get that's a little bit challenging, and if people have open claims and they're trying to pick up work, the Jasper event that you referred to, I'm not quite sure exactly what it is, having been living in Ottawa. But if it were to provide work, it's a possibility that they could work while on claim, and so those additional earnings they could still continue to receive a portion of their EI benefits while they are earning something at that Jasper event. So for those open claims, the working while claim provisions help in terms of trying to supplement income in these difficult times.
So what I wasn't asking about any event. I'm just saying that hours fluctuate, and employers have always been using EI as a form of top up, right? So we have many people who are working 20. Some weeks you work 30. You have an open claim, and the weeks that you're working less, you claim hours, right? So you would shift those. So if I was an employer and I had restaurant X, I would put my work sharing agreement in, put my unit in, say it's all cooks and waiters, okay, 2 units, right? And I would say everybody gets 30 or 40, and now they're really working 30, but it's kind of 40, and they get that top up. Their existing claim changes, right? Because I will see a hesitancy in workers not wanting to be part of a work unit because they don't want to jeopardize their current claim. So, how do you navigate that piece? Because this is 6 months later, and most people in town are on EI already in some form or another, right? Some people have finished their claims already. So when they navigate this as businesses, they have to decide, is this a new claim? Do you keep your open and existing claim? Is the EI, because we've had a lot of scenarios that people are getting cut off because they're like, oh, great, I'm working 35 hours this week, and now I'm on a full-time job. But then in 2
Mhm.
weeks later, things go down again. And so that's the piece that's really important for us to, as employers and as the employment center, making really clear with people, because it's been hard enough for the last 6 months and they don't want to mess with what money's coming in.
Yeah, so I mean, Antoine, feel free. I have one of my colleagues in here to jump in, but also our Service Canada colleagues. But my understanding is that under a work sharing agreement, first of all, maybe I'll just flag under EI benefits, the replacement rate, or the income that is replaced, is only 55% of a worker's earnings. So it's not a lot of money, right? So in terms of that, it's always more advantageous for the worker to be part of a work sharing agreement, even if they're on EI, right? Like, so that you can understand in difficult times, as it is for so many of us, and certainly in your communities, this is going to be better for the employers and for the workers. So maybe
Okay,
point one.
that's great, Mona, that really helps, because I wanted that iterated for everybody who's here. My other question is, many businesses have insurance that covers employee wages right now. So say, for instance, business X has good insurance and they can pay their employees 30 hours a week, even though they're actually meeting 20 or getting 20. So a lot of businesses have that right now. Will they qualify?
So I don't know the details about that.
It's just honestly happening. So, so for some businesses, I can see where they have insurance, not everybody, but some people have excellent insurance. And so they're paying their employees full-time hours. 30 is usually the mark. And because there's a big need right now in Jasper to retain the people you have,
Right.
we know that summer is going to get busier.
Mhm.
Right. So, so how does insurance affect that? Can those businesses with insurance that are already topping people's wages up and creating some equity there, do they qualify?
So I don't know if Service Canada wants to jump in on that. Cynthia, do you have a view? I mean, honestly, but I'll let you speak.
Yeah, hi, Mona. Yes, again, this is a little something that I think is outside of the program piece. It maybe would be more related to EI when it comes to the employees' earnings. So if they're being topped up, again, with monies
So
received during a work sharing claim, I think.
I think the question really was actually about will they qualify will the employers qualify to enter into a work sharing agreement if they have business insurance that is already covering their employees' wages, and there's no need actually to reduce hours. The work sharing steps in, as you've clarified, when a business is seeing reduced levels of activity. And, if there's other resources there to maintain those levels of activity, to maintain, their workers' hours, I would not see, I mean, not the expert from the service delivery side, but I would not see why work sharing would necessarily be needed to step in. That being said, and I see Stavros here, Stavros on another call, we talked about the fact that a while ago, a lot of those business insurance pieces for individual companies was coming to an end. And in that event, where levels have to, there may be a reduction in the ordinary business levels of a company, then you can understand why work sharing would be important to those businesses.
Yeah,
That
and I think
helps.
the whole
Thank you. Yeah, that really helps, that explanation, and that does make sense. I'm sure some people will have their insurance decreasing. I have one other hard question. So when I'm looking at this for a length of 26 weeks, so here's one of the challenges in Jasper. I'm throwing everything at you. We are actually, as an employment center, we are seeing actually that we have a lot of open jobs in Jasper. I know this sounds weird, but there's tons of jobs in Jasper right now that some will or will not qualify for. We have a large population of temporary foreign workers. Many left after the fire for various of reasons, but here's what I'm thinking. You have a 26-week claim that you get, I don't know, you get busy and get this going by February, right? The summer's going to be busy here, right? So employers right now are poaching. I'm not saying all you employers are doing that, but there is a deep concern that we do not have the adequate staff for a lot of the smaller businesses in town. So I'm not talking about the big businesses with hotels. Most of our hotels, except for 2, did not lose the housing, or they have enough housing right now for their summer staff, their seasonal staff. So when I'm looking at smaller businesses for a 26-week claim, I would say the summer's going to be busy again, right? But the fall isn't. And, so the irony for me is we're going to implement a program that may help everybody to stay at certain businesses. But to be quite honest, I foresee in Jasper that most people are going to have 2 jobs because it's going to be so busy in the summer and it's going to die completely end of September, right? That is the seasonality of Jasper. Wildfire just killed everybody last fall and summer. Typically, it's slower in the winter, right? It's going to pick up in the summer. Pretty hard to say exactly what's going to happen, but we do believe that tourism will come back even to a equivalency of maybe 80%, even though there's hotel rooms less. So you have a 26-week open claim for this work sharing agreement. And then October hits and you're slow as molasses again, which probably typically happens. Is that okay? Because these claims, I'm going to tell you right now, it's going to work right now till around June, and it'll work again in October, November of next year, right? So that's typical for Jasper. Is that still a wildfire issue?
So I'm just going to make a quick distinction. Again, somebody said on the chat, Heidi asks the best questions. You do ask the best questions, but let's make a distinction. We're talking about employer work sharing applications, and ideally they're established agreements that can have a minimum duration of 6 weeks, and under ordinary circumstances, or regular rules of the program, can last up to 26 weeks. But with these new flexibilities, that can actually be further extended. If there is a need, there is no requirement, but there is a flexibility there that allows for it, because not all businesses are the same, and we understand that, so we're trying to be responsive. But the minimum duration is 6 weeks. Okay.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be 26 weeks. It doesn't have to be 38, or even 76. There's a flexibility there. Maybe that's one thing I'll flag. So that's one part of the program. And then the other part is when there is an agreement established and you do have workers who are temporarily working reduced hours, per week until their employer recovers to some viability levels, given the impacts of wildfires, they are eligible for those EI claim benefits. And that's what you were talking about. Some people that, may have open claims, but those are laid off workers. I'm talking about workers who are not laid off, who have, continued work, are part of a work sharing agreement, but they're just working less hours, right? And so for those workers, those are EI work sharing benefits, right? They're typically a smaller benefit rate, so even less money actually, because, right, they're not fully laid off. They're only getting compensated for part of their lost wages. And they're only, it's for a short duration until, like, for the length of the agreement. So if the agreement is 6 weeks, which it could be, that's the duration of the work sharing benefits that would be in place that the workers would be eligible for.
Okay. So I know, but this is like when I'm thinking about this program, if I was a business owner, I would keep this open for the maximum. But I know for sure that summer is going to be busy at some of these places, and then it's going to slow down again. And what we're seeing continually in Jasper is there's a whole bunch of unintended things that are happening in Jasper. I'll give you an example. Jasper Employment helped temporary foreign workers to apply for open work permits. We got 830,
Mhm.
right? Many of those, we did that because we wanted people to leave town we wanted that possibility, right? So what we didn't realize is that people love Jasper. They want to stay here. The effects of fire, trauma, they stayed, right? And so this could work for a lot of them because a lot of them are underemployed. And then we have some fabulous employers who kept everybody on staff and decreased everybody's hours,
Mhm.
right? So there's so many scenarios that are playing out. But again, what I'm trying to say is, can you have a work sharing agreement where in the summer, everybody is able to work enough hours because there's enough tourism, and then you just revitalize it in the fall, or do you apply again? What do you do?
So I think that's a question for Service Canada. Again, work sharing only applies when there's reduced hours. So in your example,
Okay,
if they
okay,
came
that
up
helps
to
me.
back to
Okay,
normal levels or a normal viability, in relation to the wildfires, work sharing doesn't apply.
So
okay.
Mona, if you applied for 20 weeks and business really picks up again and you're booming after 10 weeks, can you get out of the agreement? Or
No.
can you delay it or just pause it?
Yeah.
So I'm going
Guess
to
it's
let
kind of the
Cynthia
question
jump
Heidi's
in on
getting
that.
at.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
maybe I'll
let
just
Cynthia.
weigh in on that. So, if
Okay.
the employer has recovered, they're back to full-time hours. And I'm not saying that they're not going to need it again, but right now, the situation, if we just look at that example, then the agreement would end if it's 6 weeks, if it's 20 weeks. And then if the employer does need the program again within the period of the special measures, and I think that question popped up in the chat, December 1st, 2024, August 3rd, 2025. Right now, that's our timeline for the special measures. So the last agreement to be eligible the last date rather for an agreement to start would be the Sunday, the 3rd of August. That's when agreements always start on a Sunday, they end on a Saturday. So if that employer had to, they ended their agreement. And again, we don't keep agreements open because those weeks tick away typically. And then, not that there is that mandatory cooling off period because that's waived, but um, we would still look to say, okay, you're working full hours now, and the agreement would then end early, let's say. There's no penalty for that. Then if the employer needed to come back, let's say in July rather, they needed to come back, they could start a new agreement in July. And that agreement could potentially, as Mona indicated, would be 26 weeks, but there's a possibility of extending by 12 weeks to 38 weeks, right? So again, we have to look at the bookends of the eligibility period for the actual, applying for the program, December 1st, 2024 to August 3rd, 2025. So I don't know if that answers your question in part or in full, but
It really does. That's
okay.
really helpful. So there is a question in the chat. So the irony of Jasper is, again, so unintended consequences are continually happening. We do believe in Jasper that there'll be a pickup in tourism, but with some of the other challenges with housing that is not being produced, federally, provincially, you can pick who to blame, but it's hitting the news a lot. We're gonna have a shortage of workers. So I do foresee, and we're having a job fair this Thursday. We have 600 open jobs right now. We won't have enough people already. We know that. And so what's going to be interesting by this summer, most people are expecting to work 60 to 80 hours a week. A lot of people will do that because that's the nature of many souls in Jasper. They work their butts off all summer because the work is there. And so it seems like really this work sharing agreement works for Jasper basically up to June, July, when we believe that everything's going to really get going again, because between contractors coming into town, monopolizing hotel rooms, eating a lot, tourism coming back, checking out Jasper, we have the tours from Europe and other places booking the regular tours. So I see this works in that way. And our new problem in Jasper will be, what does the fall look like? Which is kind of typical, but it could change. So It's interesting. So this is a great short-term measure from basically February to June from what I can estimate.
Excellent. Thanks, Heidi, for all those questions. Dallas, I see you have several questions in the chat. I think some of them have been answered, but did you want to come on camera and ask, or do you want me to ask those on your behalf? Okay, I will just jump in then. So does varying hours affect the eligibility? For example, on Family Day weekend, we won't be as busy as usual, but we'll be busier than the rest of the weeks in February. It doesn't mean that I can give more hours consistently.
Cynthia, do you want to answer that? I can to the best of my ability.
Sorry. So in terms of the hours per week, so the minimum, there's on the EI side, and I guess this is what you would be addressing too, like the minimum number of hours in order for EI work sharing benefits to be paid would be half an hour. So obviously, if there are weeks where there's no work happening, there are no hours missed for work sharing. Therefore, EI benefits for work sharing wouldn't be paid. But there is a flexibility built into this program where the employer going into the program indicates that they would be using a minimum of 10 or sorry missing a minimum of 10% up to a maximum of 60%. So with the temporary special measures, if you need to use more hours for work sharing, so if more hours are being missed, then you can exceed that 60%. But if there's a day during the week, let's say a family day and it's a stat day, we understand that that stat days are sorry, not we understand, but stat days are a responsibility of the employers, and work sharing doesn't pay for stat days. But if they have to, they're not working that day because of that, then there will be a way of reporting that, so that any days not worked are reflected on what's called that utilization report. And so again, there's flexibility around that.
Yes,
And
Cynthia, I think what they're getting at is that on Family Day weekend, it's going to be very busy and they'll have a lot more activity
right.
because a lot more tourists are going to show up or visitors are going to be in the park. And so therefore people, instead of only getting 20 hours that week, might get 40 hours that week, but that's the only week that they'll be able to offer them 40 hours because of the heightened activity because it's a long weekend.
Yeah, in the spring where they don't feel like that there's going to be enough work. So maybe I can just jump in on this. My understanding, Cynthia, is that work sharing, you've rightly sort of laid out what are the typical restrictions on work sharing in terms of the 10% and the 60%, but that on average, work sharing hours can vary from week to week, as long as the average decrease remains within a given range. And we've actually we've built in more flexibility as to what that range can be with these temporary special measures. So, we're not saying it's strictly, you have to have a decrease that is a minimum of 10%. It can be less than 10%. It can be more than 60% with these flexibilities. So, but we understand that it may not be exactly the same number of reduced hours every week, but it has to relatively stay the same. And that's why the conversations that that employers with established agreements have with their Service Canada contacts is so important. So there are sort of reporting requirements with work sharing, and that sort of helps make sure that the requirements of the agreement are being met, and that work sharing is also being responsive to the need at hand.
Absolutely. And I just want to really emphasize that those discussions do take place. So when an application comes in, it's not just looked at from a paper perspective. We contact the employers and we do, offer the support, education, but we also make sure that we're clarifying things. So if there's missing information on the application, we go in and we ask for that information. So, education and support, those are two things that go hand in hand with this program when it comes to the applications and the support during the period of the agreement as well.
Thanks, Cynthia. So it looks like we have probably time for one more question, and Dallas has another one here. So does this program only work for workers that were employed prior to the fire? So normally in a season, I would start hiring and training in March, April, May, for July and August. I'm concerned that if I don't hire when university students are looking for jobs, I'm not going to be able to find staff. So speaking from experience for how much harder it is to do hiring in the summer versus the spring. So obviously he's not able to guarantee them the 40 hours for the training time. So again, how does that work in terms of bringing on new staff?
So again, I think, and again, Cynthia, you're going to have to jump in on this to correct me if need be. But you establish a work sharing agreement with your employees who agree to be part of a work sharing agreement. I'm not sure if new staff would fall into that bucket, but Cynthia, you can speak to that. I don't know if you can expand the employees that are part of a work sharing agreement, but my understanding is that it is an agreement that is established at a point in time with employers and employees to deal with that temporary decrease in activity. In terms of the question about work program that only works for workers that were employed prior to the fire. So this work sharing program is about employers and these work sharing flexibilities that we are introducing are really about ensuring that the work sharing program is being responsive to employers that were impacted by the wildfires in Jasper and in Bunabonabee Creek Nation, but we're talking about Jasper, right? So it's the employers and workers that were impacted. And that's what these flexibilities are about.
Yeah, exactly.
Anything more to add?
Yeah. Well, again, you know what? I think the impact employers who are directly impacted and making sure that the employees are not further disadvantaged. So if they come on board and they put an application in, and we've got employees that are, affected, and the business is affected because there's not enough work. Anytime you're bringing on anybody new, we do look at the reason. Why are those folks being brought in, and case by case on that. But when you're making a change to the agreement, we would have to look at what is the change. And if you're needing to bring people on, it could be a unit of people that are now affected that weren't affected before. So, there's not enough work. Therefore, there's a work sharing agreement needed. And the pressures, that you're under as the employer to deal with the impact of the fires and how it's affecting your employees, then, if something changes, we would look at that, and we would, case by case, have to determine, would those employees be eligible to be brought on from a program perspective, and what's the reason that they be added. I'm not sure if I've answered the question. I know it's a bit of a tricky one because there can be many scenarios around this.
So just a quick follow-up question. So is there contact information that can be shared for follow-up questions? And I know the program details were shared at the beginning of the chat, but I don't know if there's direct contact information these employers can reach out to.
So Cynthia, on your end, on the Service Canada side, because you're probably the best placed in terms of being in the region to support.
So in terms of the regional support, we do have a regional general delivery box where questions can come in. Typically, again, there's no wrong door here, but typically those would be questions for existing employers who have agreements with us because we have their information. If the question goes to our national unit, there's a national general delivery box that questions will go to, and if they can answer them at that level, then they will. If they need to refer it to us, then they would do that, for example. There's also an employer contact center, and they would have the ability to answer some program criteria questions as well. and
Excellent.
we can share those.
Yeah, please do. Thank you so much. Stavros, I see you have your hand up, and I know you've had it up and down a few times. So quickly
I
before
know, and
we close out.
thank you so much, Shauna, and thanks everyone for arranging this. Just two things. One is I think you've heard it here today. The tourism economy is kind of interesting because our factory, which is the communities themselves, they only have one storefront, and that storefront doesn't have access to markets all of the time. Ergo, you get rises and falls in business levels. And so imagine if you had a factory that only sold its widgets out of the storefront. It creates these large swings. So maximum flexibility is very much appreciated for this. The second piece is that these are majority small businesses who do not have a lot of internal capacity. And so any consideration of that is very much helpful. Two questions. One is who approves the extension of the program? So currently the program is approved to 26 weeks. If there is a request to extend that program in order to start thinking about next fall season, what needs to happen there? One, and two, in terms of, and I'm sure this you can actually put off to another time because I'm sure it's a more complex question, which is on work share units. For example, it's not just front of house and back of house. Is there any limit, and can employers have single unit work share units? So I'm a restaurant. I typically have two positions in my expediting work share unit, but now it's one position. And so, like, are all of those knock codes kind of how you want us to think about it, or what does that look like? That was a big question. I'm sorry. First one's most important, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time on the second one.
Cynthia, do you want to jump in terms of the extension of the agreement? And actually, those are both questions probably from
Yeah.
Service Canada.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
You can hear me? Sorry, I don't know if something's just happened to my
headset.
headset.
You. Yes,
okay, perfect. Sorry, something funny going on with my headset here. So if an employer has an existing agreement and they would like to request a change to extend that, then they would deal with us, the work sharing program unit. And specifically, we have a unit in Western Territory region. Contact information is on the website, and I'm going to put this in the chat, or I can provide it if I don't get to it during the call, but I'll definitely follow up with the contact information. And then the responsible officer who receives that request would be in contact with you and about that extension to the program. So I don't know if that's a pretty sort of short and sweet answer to that one. The second one about units, again, usually a bit of a discussion between you as the employer and maybe the employee rep as well as to the units, but generally they're formed based on occupation. Yes, it can be one big unit. If the work can be shared, or if the impact to the employees is really a very tight kind of interaction, and as far as the work and how it's allocated and how it's carried out, it can be one unit. The key, again, by unit is equal sharing of work. So we want to make sure that we're setting those up effectively, and that the work can be shared by unit. And so there is usually that little bit of a discussion with the officer and the employer around sort of structuring those units to make sure that that's done effectively.
So thank you, Cynthia. I see we're 5 minutes over, so we're going to cut it off there and be respectful of everybody's time. Just on behalf of the Alberta Chambers and the Jasper Park Chamber, I see Nikki is there. Hi, Nikki. We just want to extend our sincere appreciation to all of you for joining, Nancy, Cynthia, Mona, for all of the great information and support for the Jasper business community through this program. So thank you. Thank you for joining us, everybody on the call, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.